Welcome back to What the Fact, everybody. I'm Katie, and this is Erin, and we're coming now to our third and final segment, which is all about Ohio. We're monitoring the Senate race going on in Ohio. Please stop doing that.
Sorry.
As well as a really interesting governor's race. So today we're looking at a pair of claims from that race. Erin, let's say maybe you haven't been paying attention to the governor's race in Ohio. It is very interesting, though. Tell us, just set the stage.
Well, it's a rematch, first of all, and it's really kind of it has national overtones in a lot of ways. On the Republican side, you have Mike DeWine, who was a former U.S. Senator, was the Attorney General, and is now seeking to be governor. He got elected Attorney General by beating his Democratic opponent, Richard Cordray, who went on to be in Barack Obama's administration. So you kind of have this kind of national Republican versus national Democrat trying to replace the term-limited John Kasich. And so, you know, it's kind of a nasty, bubbling race in a very purple state. And so, you know, you have obviously lots of local issues, but in this particular cycle, there's going to be a lot of talk about national politics.
All right, so the first claim we're looking at is from Cordray, who pulled out the Betsy DeVos card.
She's the education secretary, if you don't know.
Under Donald Trump.
Yep.
And so Cordray said Betsy DeVos owes Ohio $5.3 million for campaign finance violations, and Mike DeWine's office refuses to collect the fine.
Yep.
Is that really true? Let's take a listen.
Education Secretary Betsy DeVos is at the center of a little gubernatorial mudslinging in Ohio. Richard Cordray, a Democrat running for governor, says Mike DeWine, his Republican opponent, refused to collect $5.6 million in fines from DeVos when he was Ohio's Attorney General. He made the claim in a Facebook ad last month. It's true that Ohio fined a DeVos-run political action committee $5.6 million for campaign finance law violations. But it's not true that DeWine, as Attorney General, refused to collect the fine. The fine came when the Virginia faction of the PAC run by DeVos and her husband transferred more than $870,000 to the Ohio branch, despite a warning that doing so would be illegal. Both branches of the PAC challenged the fine in court. The judge threw it out. A subsequent court ruling made the same call. But during that whole time, Cordray was the one who was Ohio's Attorney General. His spokesperson said he didn't collect the fine because it was being litigated almost the whole time he was in office. 3 years after DeWine took Cordray's job, he got a court order to enforce the fine on DeVos PAC. But by then, it didn't exist anymore, and there was no money with which to pay the fine. There's been plenty of debate since then about how the situation should be squared and who should be responsible. But for the purposes of this fact check, the bottom line is this. It's inaccurate to claim DeWine refused to collect millions of dollars from Betsy DeVos.
All right, Erin, so basically what we just learned is that this was a swing and like a muff from Richard Cordray. There's something kind of there, but he's taking that element of truth and really exaggerating what really happened.
Yeah.
So gets our mostly false rating.
Yeah, so mostly false means there's a shred of truth, but it is really kind of misleading. To me, the thing that sticks out is that this case really actually predates DeWine, back when Cordray was the Attorney General. And so, you know, going from there and then looking out through the timeline, you just see that this is, again, kind of like you're taking kind of a controversial figure, you're throwing in a big pile of money and trying to cast blame on one person and their team. When you kind of pull back the curtain, you realize this is one, way more complicated, and two, casting blame on DeWine in this case is actually kind of difficult. I mean, the reality is DeWine is the person who in 2013 got a court judgment to actually enforce this $5.3 million fine, but by then DeVos's PACs had wound down and then they no longer existed. They didn't have money, so they couldn't pay the fine. So I'm not quite sure what DeWine more could have done. I mean, the system, you can blame the system. It's set up to insulate Betsy DeVos. She certainly has $5.3 million between her and her family if she wanted to make that payment out of her own funds, but not legally required to. The PACs don't exist. There's no money in the PACs. So I don't know what more DeWine could have done. And so to kind of pull at these threads, Richard Cordray, I think, is really kind of like stretching the truth to try to kind of paint DeWine as like a Trump flunky or something like that. So.
That's true. Okay, now let's go to the other side. A claim from DeWine, who had some words about Cordray in a video.
Richard Cordray wants to raise your taxes by reversing President Trump's tax reform. Cordray wants to revoke your $2,000 middle-class tax cut.
Now, where have I heard that before? Basically everywhere.
Yeah.
This is a claim we're hearing a lot because a lot of Democrats were very vocal about the tax cuts, but it's not telling the full story.
Well, this is where, again, so national politics is seeping into what amounts to a state race. And so as our fact check points out, and by the way, you can get your PolitiFact Ohio fact checks in the Dayton Daily News and in the Cleveland and Cincinnati markets on the Scripps ABC station, so I hope you're watching. But in this case, we're talking about an election for governor.
Yeah.
So Richard Cordray certainly has thoughts about the Donald Trump Republican-led tax cut package passed at the end of 2017. But if elected governor, he can do as much about the tax cut law as we can.
A lot, then.
Nothing. As governor, he has obviously no say in what happens in federal or national politics. Again, Cordray has said, I don't like the tax cut policy. I wish it were to be rolled back.
Right.
But it's kind of an opinion that cannot be enforced. So for DeWine to kind of lay this charge on Cordray is a bit misleading.
That's going to do it for this week's show. I had a good time. I hope you had a good time. And I hope you had a good time. Thanks so much for joining us. Until next week, we'll see you.